Howdy, and welcome to Brandy's Book Stack. I'm Brandy. I'm a mom with 2 kids. I work during the week, so I'm pretty busy. Busy enough that I don't get as much time as some YouTubers to read as much as I'd like. But hopefully, with my advice, I can help you figure out what maybe is worth your time to read.
I mostly read classics, fantasy, and mystery, followed by a little bit of lit fic, and also some romance and horror are probably the genres that I read the least. Today, so you can get to know me a little, I'm planning to talk about a short book haul that I have, and then that's followed by what I read in January and February. So without further ado, recently I went to the event of the year, at least for me, which is the Friends of the Library book sale. They have the Friends of the Library book sale every year at our fairgrounds, and they rent out a huge warehouse-like building, and all hardback books are, or oversized paperback books are $2, and all paperback books, mass market paperback books, are $1. So I tend to go and buy quite a few books. So I'll just share what I got. So first of all, and as you can see, I had to have a wagon to actually bring them all home. So starting off was Rosamund Pilcher. I learned about Rosamund Pilcher through a couple of YouTubers, Gina Stainer and Miranda Mills. Both talked about Rosamund Pilcher. She sort of straddles the line between cozy fiction and romance. And I've really come to enjoy a lot of her books. So I decided I'd be on the lookout for those at the Friends of the Library book sale, and I got, I think, just about everything she ever wrote. So I'll just go through the Rosamund Pilchers pretty quickly. The first is The Shell Seekers. Then we have Coming Home. The Day of the Storm. The Blue Bedroom. Another View. Flowers in the Rain. Sleeping Tiger. Pretty floral covers. Voices in Summer. You can see I really went hog wild with the Rosamund Pilcher. Snow in April. And Winter Solstice. I got this nice copy of Winter Solstice. Now, right before I went to the Friends of the Library sale, I actually visited a favorite local bookstore of mine in Tulsa. We live in Oklahoma City area, but I grew up in the Tulsa area, and there's a great bookstore there called Gardner's Used Books. And I stopped in there to check out what they had, and they had a Rosamund Pilcher that I purchased, and I bought this for $6, which I thought was actually a pretty good deal, only to find out this version was available at the book sale, and I could have got it for $2. So you live, you learn. Next, I have this book. This is by Robert Fulghum, and it's called All I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. This is a book that has a lot of personal meaning for me. When my grandfather was ill and actually dying in the hospital, this book was floating around the waiting room, and I read it. And it's a humorous book, sort of self-helpy, sort of funny. And it really helped us all, everybody in the waiting room, sort of get through a bad time. And when I saw this at the book sale, I just had to buy it because of the personal meaning it had for me. Next, I keep hearing good things about P.D. James Mysteries, but I haven't ever read one, and so I found this novel at the book sale, so I grabbed a copy. It's A Taste for Death. Taste for Death. Next, this beautiful vintage copy of The Idylls of the King by Alfred Lord Tennyson. If you're not familiar with this book, it is King Arthur, Camelot telling, so I was excited to get this. I've also never read anything by Muriel Spart, and I've heard great things about her as an author, so I picked up The Crime of Miss Jean Brodie, which is supposed to be one of her noted works. Another author that I've heard a lot about, particularly recently here on YouTube, is The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. I've heard great things about this book, and again, this nice oversized paperback is available for $2, so why not? Next, I have quite a few Anne Perry books. I'm a fan of Anne Perry's fiction. She writes about the Victorian era, and she writes murder mysteries. So, and if you didn't know it, Anne Perry, sort of oddly, was actually a murderer herself. When she was a young woman, her and her best friend killed her best friend's mother. She was caught. It was a very clumsy crime, ironically, for a mystery writer. They bludgeoned the poor woman to death, and she did go to prison for it and served her time. And she changed her name and moved to Britain and was famous for a number of years as Anne Perry before the connection was made between her and the girl from Australia who had committed this heinous murder. So, kind of a creepy connection, but interesting nonetheless. So this is Anne Perry's The Face of a Stranger. And then I also got these really nice oversized paperbacks. Buckingham Palace Gardens by Anne Perry and Brunswick Gardens by Anne Perry. Next is a book that I had owned in the past, but somehow I cannot find what happened to my copy, and that is The Hunt for Red October. I don't like a lot of Tom Clancy's later fiction. I feel like it kind of just became a mill with other people doing the writing and churning things out, but his early novels are really good. They're Cold War era, Russian spies and that sort of thing. And if you've never tried The Hunt for Red October, give it a chance. It's a really good book. Next, I have The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. I'm currently doing a reading challenge that is reading the 100 best-selling books of all time and the 100 best books of all time. For the best-selling books, I'm using a list that came off of Goodreads and one off of Wikipedia. So there's some overlap between the lists, but there's a lot of similarities too. And then for the, quote, best books of all time, I'm reading off of a list that came from Goodreads that was pulled from the Modern Library, where noted authors of today select the books that they think are the greatest books of all time. This is on that best books of all time list. I haven't got to it. I'm not real hopeful about it, so I didn't want to spend a lot of money on this book because I am going to... I did not like the Trial by Franz Kafka. I just really hated it. But maybe this one I'll enjoy more. We'll see when we get there. Next is The Scarlet Pimpernel. Some YouTuber or another mentioned this book and said it was a lot like The Count of Monte Cristo, and The Count of Monte Cristo is one of my very favorite books. So I thought this might be worth giving a try, and it's a beautiful vintage copy. Another author that several YouTubers I trust recommended is Georgette Heyer. She writes Regency romances, and I found this beautiful copy of a Georgette Heyer novel, Cotillion. And then also, I'm really proud of this one, The Charity Girl, which is the lovely vintage copy of a Georgette Heyer novel. I became a big fan of Truman Capote when I read his short story, A Christmas Memory. And so this was another one that I saw at the library book sale and decided I just had to have it because I was so enchanted with the Christmas Memory, that short story that he wrote. So excited to read that. Next is a book that got a lot of internet buzz. It's a more modern book, and that is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is a story of Shakespeare and mainly his son, from what I understand. So it's supposed to be a really great book. I love Shakespeare, and so many YouTubers that I respect have recommended this book. When I saw it for a couple bucks, picked it up. Next, I found this beautiful vintage copy of D.E. Stevenson, and it's Celia's House. I came across D.E. Stevenson from several YouTubers' recommendations with Miss Bunkle's book. I loved that book. I've read the sequel to that, Miss Bunkle Married. I still have The Four Graces and The Two Mrs. Abbotts on my bookshelf, ready to read at some point. But looking online for D.E. Stevenson vintage books is really hard, even online. So the fact that I found this and it was only $2 was pretty spectacular, I thought. Another recommendation I got from YouTubers for kind of cozy fiction that I enjoy is Miss Read, which is a story of kind of a school mistress in the English countryside, and I came across this vintage version of a Miss Read book, and I thought, since it's $2, I'd give it a go. And the last one is again not from the library book sale, but from the Gardner's bookstore that I talked about earlier. This is The Tin Drum by Günter Grass. This is another book that is on my best books of all time list, and it's kind of personal, I think, to me, because in Oklahoma City area, The Tin Drum was a movie. Oscar, I think it was an Oscar winner. I'm not sure about that, but it was definitely a very well acclaimed movie that they tried to ban in Oklahoma. So I thought, I better get my hands on the book before they start trying to ban it here in the book form. And again, this was at Gardner's. You can even see the little sticker on it. It was $3.45. I hate it when they put stickers on books. It's really annoying. But I got a copy there, and then guess what? I went to the library sale, and I could have got it for $1. So, lesson learned for me for next year. Wait for the library sale. So that's it from my book haul. So now I'd like to talk about the stuff that I read in January, February, and I'm kind of combining these together because I don't read the 150 books like so many YouTubers do. I have a pretty busy and fulfilling life, and I just don't have the time to read that quantity of books. I'm usually more 50 to 60 a year range. But I do read a lot of quality fiction, and so I thought we'll talk about that. So one is The Warden by Anthony Trollope. This is in the Barsetshire Chronicles, and this is about a man who has a crisis of conscience. He runs what we would call today a nursing home, that is charitably funded by the Church of England. And it was funded from a man in the Middle Ages who willed his estate for the maintenance of the indigent elderly. And specifically, I think it was 12 men. And over time, the property became more and more value and yielded more and more profits. However, the men that it funded to be in the nursing home were not given any more of that profits, and all those extra profits went to the warden. And so a controversy arises in the community when this is discovered, and there is a hue and cry for the actual men that this funds, this nursing home funds, to get the bulk of the profits. And the warden feels kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, he wants to do what is right, but on the other hand, he has a son-in-law who is in the church hierarchy above him, who believes that if he says that he's done wrong, he's saying the church did wrong. And so he would be dragging down his beloved church. And then on the other hand, the man that is leading the charge to get these indigent men more money also happens to be in love with the warden's daughter, and the warden's daughter is in love with him. So he's kind of in this rock and the hard place, and it's whether he'll do what his conscience dictates or whether he'll do the easy thing. So it's a great book. The warden is a great character. Really, all the characters in this book are really well drawn, and so I'm excited to continue on in this series. But this is the first book, and it's pretty thin, so you can read it pretty quickly, and it's a good read. So I would recommend. The next is a Rosamund Pilcher. This is the end of summer, and it is a light romance. I really love Rosamund Pilcher's writing style. She is very cozy. Most of her books are set in Scotland. This is no exception. And she makes you just want to get on a plane and go to Scotland immediately. That said, doesn't mean that there's no flaws in this book or many of her books. I think the main character is a little bit helpless, I guess would be the word I'd use. And she doesn't have any ambition at all to get a job or take care of herself. She's 21 years old. She has been taking care of her father physically, sort of, while he takes care of her financially. And then she moves to Scotland where she's staying with her grandmother. And the whole idea seems to be that her only real thought is to get a husband and get married. And I don't love that. But despite those minor flaws, I do really like this book. I think it was good. One other weird flaw is one of the love interests is her first cousin, which is just, weird. I don't know why she chose to do that. But I know that sounds really gross. I just kind of pretended like he wasn't her cousin. But it was a really good book. There's a point when the main character goes and buys a sweater, which ought to be as boring as, watching paint dry. But I could just listen to her, read her talking about getting a sweater for forever, because she just has such a great writing style. So that's this. I think it's worth a read. I'd give it about a 3-star. But it's not her best work, for sure. Next is a mystery. This is by Tim Heel, called Just Desserts. This was an interesting book, and I really liked it. It was a very different sort of protagonist. We follow a sort of James Bond character, but who is nothing like James Bond. So, for example, he is a spy. He is working for the government to unravel mysteries, and yet he is ugly, a bit fat, not very good at his job. He's just sort of lucky. He's not a ladies' man. He has one girlfriend, and, she's nothing particularly fantastic. So it was kind of refreshing to see
a protagonist in a spy novel that was a bit more like, well, the rest of us. And it's pretty funny at parts. There's a particularly kind of funny segment of this book where the protagonist plays cricket, and he's really nervous about it because he's really bad at cricket. And he talks about that. It's very cute. And it also centers around the culinary world, which, as my waistline might attest, I am a big fan of food. So it was fun from that aspect as well. And I really enjoyed this. And again, short little read. Definitely, worth a whirl. I'd say about 4 stars. Next, we have Lysistrata by Aristophanes. This is a great Greek play about the War of the Sexes. This takes place during the Peloponnesian War, and the ladies of Athens and Sparta decide to go on a sex strike until their husbands end the war. And it's really funny. There's a lot of, battle of the wits back and forth, and it's very relatable to today. It is a little bit bawdy, so be prepared for that. If you are uncomfortable by discussions about sex, this might not be the book for you. But I thought it was really great and very short read. If you're wanting to get into classics and you're wanting something that's pretty easy to get through, I'd say this would be a good choice. This is one of the first books I read this year. This is a book by the comedian Sarah Millican called How to Be Champion. And I really like Sarah Millican a lot. If you've never heard of her, you can check out her comedy on YouTube. She's really funny. And this book is sort of half comedic autobiography and half self-help book. And really, for a comedian particularly, she gives really great advice. There's a lot in this book about just loving yourself, being comfortable in your skin, and if people don't like it, screw them. And I think it's a really healthy, positive message. She talks a lot about, being kind of a nerdy kid and interested in reading when she was young, and that, she had to become an adult to kind of come into that, which I think would be a good message for a lot of kids today. But it does have a lot of cursing and sexual talk in it, so if you're not comfortable with that, maybe no, but I still think it would be a good book maybe to share with a kid that might be struggling with self-esteem issues, because it's funny and it's uplifting. Next is The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. I believe this is considered a middle grade book. It's either middle grade or young adult, I'm not sure. But it's a book they made a movie on that I watched a lot when I was in elementary school. And it is about the last unicorn in existence, maybe. And she heads out to try to find others of her kind and maybe rescue them if they need rescuing. I really did like this book. I would say that it is a little dark for a middle grade, and the ending isn't particularly happy. And for that reason, I would say, it's not like a 5-star, it'd be more like a 4-star range. But it is a good book, and it is worth the read, and pretty slim to get through. It's a nice little light fantasy if you're interested in that sort of thing. Next, and last because it's so big, by Ursula K. Le Guin. I only read the first, this has, I believe, 5 novels in it. And I only read the first novel in this series. I picked this up from the library initially because I love Charles Vess, who did the beautiful artwork that you can see on the cover here. And then throughout the book, he has little illustrations. And but I had never read the Earthsea novels by Ursula K. Le Guin, and this book is pretty pricey. The retail price of it is $60, so it's a pretty pricey book. So I was a little worried about, buying this book just for the artwork and then maybe hating the story, but my fears were unfounded. After reading the first novel in this series, I really, really liked it. We follow a young man named Ged as he is on his quest to become a wizard. And he actually goes to wizard school in this book. And before you say that's a Harry Potter ripoff, Ursula K. Le Guin wrote in like 1970, I think was when Wizard of Earthsea was actually first written. So she really kind of was ahead of her time. And there's actually some great minority characters in this, which is pretty unusual in fantasy at the time that Le Guin was writing. So it's a great, fun story. I'd highly recommend it. I'd highly recommend it if you have a young person in your life that might enjoy it. I read all age group fiction, and this is a good one. All I care is it good? And this is a good one. So that's it for what I read in January and February. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you do, please like and subscribe, and feel free to join me in the future. Thanks a lot. Bye.